I decided to eat sugar-free gummy bears. It was the worst mistake of my life. I was heading to Pearson International Airport for a business trip when I realized something. I hadn't eaten since lunch, and I was feeling a bit hungry. I briskly checked my watch and decided that I had enough time to grab a quick snack before going through the baggage check and security, and would get something more substantial once I was checked through security. I spotted a vending machine nestled in a relatively low traffic corner of the terminal and rushed over. My eyes scanned the colorful array of confection quickly, coming to rest on a rainbow-colored bag of Haribo sugar-free gummy bears. After I bought them, I joined the queue in the line for the flight. I began to munch on them as the line slowly advanced. To be fair, they tasted fine, just like every other manufacturer's brand of the colorful candy, and they were sugar-free to boot. As I gave the attendant my e-ticket and she weighed my bags, the first of the pains began in my stomach. I thought nothing of it at first, chalking it up to the fact that I needed something more substantial than gummy worms to tackle my hunger, but over the course of the next 5 minutes, the shooting pain began to come in more rapid succession. At this point, I had my boarding pass printed, and rubbing my stomach a little, I proceeded to security. I briefly entertained the thought of trying to find a restroom before going through security, but at that point my discomfort was manageable and I didn't think it was getting any worse, certainly not within the amount of time it would take to clear security. As I fumbled off my belt to go through the metal detector, the pain in my stomach increased and I practically had to sit on the floor to take my shoes off, terrified of what would happen if I bent in the middle to do it. It was becoming increasingly evident to me that this wasn't just a stomach ache. No, this was something much worse. As a child, I had a bout of diarrhea after a trip to Mexico with my family. I remember the feeling of nausea that swept through me before my childhood self had surrendered to the gas pains and parked myself on the toilet for an hour, pooing until I felt like I didn't have any bones left. Once I managed to step out, a sudden shock of pain racked my body, and I half wondered if I was going to give birth to a Tasmanian devil. The security agent on the other side of the detector shot a quick glance over to her coworker who narrowed his eyes and made a subtle movement towards his holster. My breathing became uneven as I entered the metal detector and I realized with alarm that I had taken off my socks without even registering it, and one of my shirt tails was untucked at the front. I held my breath, my eyes bulging dangerously from my head as the machine scanned me. As I shakily moved forward towards the agent for a pat down, my stomach began to elicit sounds that can only be described as otherworldly. It started off a sort of bubbling sound heard from afar and grew in pitch and intensity at an alarming rate. My jaw dropped in shock as what I can only describe as the sound of an agonized wailing alley cat in heat. The officer's eyes widened in alarm, and she kept her eyes glued to my stomach as she thoroughly patted me down. As she reached my shins, I felt my innards suddenly expand and plummet towards my rectum. I sprinted to the bathroom as fast as I could. With a Herculean effort and all of the strength that I could muster, I forced my cheeks together knowing that one false move would open the floodgates. I began to walk like a duck, trying to remain as unsuspicious as possible, not even caring now what other people were seeing in front of them with single-minded intensity. I grabbed my carry-on, shoes, and socks from out of the plastic tub that had passed the X-ray inspection, and without putting anything back on, I turned on my heels with the intention of finding the nearest restroom and slowly dying there one squirt at a time. But that's not what happened. I turned to go and found myself staring at three armed agents who stopped me and asked if I would follow them. Why? What's the matter? I stammered, wincing slightly as the act of speech seemed to strain the tenuous and extremely fragile truce I had negotiated between my bowels and the tempest that raged within. I have to go to the bathroom, right now, I pleaded. Just follow us please, they said, leaving no room for argument. The other travelers clearing the security check started with curiosity and revulsion at the spectacle unfolding before them, whispering amongst themselves and hurrying to pack up their belongings and get as far away from me as possible, no doubt assuming that the airport had nabbed some sort of domestic criminal. If I hadn't been feverishly trying to hold back the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, I likely would have died of shame. Once I was brought to a room, a new agent approached me. "Sir, we are going to perform a cavity search on you," a young fresh-faced agent stated in a firm but emotionless voice. His short